guys, it's Kevin again, and welcome to the first of many What I Watched videos. If you guys did not see the announcement video I did all the way back, I believe, in July, I basically talked about it where moving forward, I'm not going to be able to review every single movie in the way that I used to. What I basically decided to do is basically do a different kind of catch-up review. It's instead like a monthly review of films that I did not get a chance to review individually or just didn't have much to say about individually. So instead, I compiled it all into one video. This is going to be styled sort of like how catch-up reviews are, but a little bit different. It's basically like I would say abridged reviews of what you would have gotten. And I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's a good way for me to cover some films that maybe you've wanted me to talk about for a while, and I just haven't really had a chance to do so. So I think we're just going to go ahead and talk about the first film. So the first movie we're going to talk about here is, of course, Vivo, and I was very much looking forward to this movie. I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda, anything that he does, you guys know I get really excited for, but especially the fact that, this was going to be a musical film that's animated. The last time Lin-Manuel Miranda attached himself to an animated musical film, that ended up being for Moana, and Moana is one of my favorite modern-day Disney films, so I got really excited to see how this film was really going to turn out. The fact that it was a Sony movie as well and it was going to Netflix actually bode very well for it, especially considering, we got Mitchell's versus the Machines earlier this year, and that's one of my favorite, if not my favorite animated movie so far this year. So I was really pulling for this to be something special, and I'll say this. Vivo is definitely enjoyable in the moment, but unfortunately, it's not quite as good as I really think it wanted to be, or that I think it really could have been, and I do think it has quite a few things that do ultimately bring it down, but we'll start off with the positives. Lin-Manuel Miranda is, as expected, really good here. He adds a lot of heart and fun to this character. He plays this character, I think, very well, really wearing his heart on his sleeve, and I think really does a good job of making you believe he is this Kinkajou. A lot of people are worried that he's just playing Lin-Manuel Miranda, but I really did feel like he embodied who this character really was, and I think he did a really good job with that. Zoe Saldana is also really good here. I think she gives maybe the most emotional performance in the entire movie. I really enjoyed what she ended up doing as the character of Rosa. I was very impressed by her work here. I think she gave a very strong performance. Ynairaly Simo, who is a newcomer who plays the character of Gabby, I really enjoyed quite a bit. I've never really seen her before, but I feel like after this, we're definitely going to be seeing more of her. She's very fun, she's very charming, and I think a very likable child actress, and I hope we're able to see more of her moving forward, so I really did like her performance. And then the only other performance that really stuck out to me is Juan de Marcos González. Not in the movie a ton, but he really does make up for what he really does make the most of what he does have. He brings such a charming presence to the movie, really just bringing so much warmth to the film, and I really enjoyed what he ended up doing here. So I think that's definitely something that works very well in this film. The songs are also mostly really good. The one song that's definitely stuck with me is the opening number, One of a Kind. I got very, In the Heights type, type flashbacks from this song. I mean, you can definitely see that this is something Lin-Manuel Miranda would write. It's this really fun song that really opens up the movie. It's just so lively and just so inviting in that way, and it really gives you this sense of energy, this sense of fun, and really makes you feel like you're about to watch something special. It's like everything you'd expect for Lin-Manuel Miranda-centric musical to have. It's just got all the fun, all the liveliness that you're really expecting. Unfortunately, though, I have to say, the rest of the film never really recaptures that magic, and this is really where we get to my biggest flaw with this film, is that I do think while there is a lot to like about Vivo as a film, unfortunately, it's just a little too generic for my liking. I think that the story here isn't necessarily a bad one, it's just one we've seen a lot of times before. I think that our main character here, Vivo, as good as Lin-Manuel Lin-Manuel Miranda really is, it doesn't really have that much of an arc to him. Yes, he is trying to, you know, fulfill this goal from the character of Andreas. He is trying to fulfill that goal and do what he can to make sure that goal is, you know, finally maintained, and, you know, finally comes to fruition, and you really do hope that he's able to do that, but he himself doesn't really have all that much of an arc. I kept watching the movie, and I'm like, what is his main sort of goal in this movie, besides trying to, you know, help out Andreas? What is he really trying to do here? I didn't really feel like there was enough for this character. I didn't really feel like he went on a specific journey, and that was just very frustrating overall, and I think they really could have done more with him there. I will say, the journey that this character goes on, it's a nice little emotional journey. I think you'll definitely find yourself at least a little bit invested in it, but it all just felt a little too simplistic for my liking. I think there needed to be more there. There needed to be more going on, and there just wasn't, and I think that's why it ultimately does fall flat for me. But what really brings this character down for me is that while we are focusing a lot on Vivo, we're also focusing on this character, Gabby, who I gotta be honest, I just had a really hard time investing in. Like I said, I enjoyed the child performance here, but I thought overall as a character, I just wasn't really a big fan of her. I didn't hate her or anything like that, but I just felt that she was a character I had a really hard time connecting to. She feels very cliched. She feels, you know, she has this arc where she's sort of like overcoming a similar thing in her life, and so she acts out because of it, and no one in her family really seems to understand her except for Vivo. We've seen this arc done 1,000 times before, and while I do think there are some moments towards the end that do finally redeem her lack of emotional growth, I think overall they needed to do more with her character, so I was just very let down by what ultimately ended up happening with Gabby. I just wasn't that latched onto her character. I liked the bond that she and Vivo do form, but I felt overall that her character just wasn't that well developed for me. And like I said, they try to make up for that towards the end of the movie. It just felt too little too late, and I think that's what really does bring it down for me. But the other thing, unfortunately, and this is something that it really sucks, is the humor. I just didn't find this movie very funny at all. I found it to be very kiddie in terms of its humor. I talked about how most of the musical numbers I think are really good. There are some here that are just filler and don't really serve much of a purpose. Like Brian Tyree Henry and Cole Byer are these two characters that like Lin-Manuel Miranda Vivo comes across, and they're literally just there to be these two birds that like end up falling in love, and we get this whole sort of gag with them. I just didn't find it funny at all. It really dragged the movie down, and at no point was I laughing at really anything that was going on. Again, I was trying really hard to really, you know, to really get the humor of this movie, but it just really didn't work for me. I think kids are gonna find it really funny, but I felt overall it was really lacking in terms of, you know, in terms of comedy, so I think that's something else that brought the movie down. The animation, though, is absolutely gorgeous. I think everything looks really great, all of these locations and things like that. It's very vibrant and colorful, and that's something I think that really does keep you invested in. And I will say, it is a real shame that this didn't get to play in theaters, because I think animation wise especially, I mean, it is so visually striking in that way. It's a film you really can't take your eyes off of, and I think that's something that really does keep you invested in everything that's going on. I also really enjoyed the bond that Vivo did form with Andreas. It's not in the movie a ton, just based on what ends up happening plot-wise, but I felt that overall there was more that could have been done there, and but I felt they did enough when it came to the bond between those two. You understood it. It feels very genuine. You really find yourself wrapped up in those two, and I thought they did a good job with that. Like I said, the majority of these musical numbers I really did enjoy quite a bit. There's a song called Keep the Beat as well, and it seems to be everyone's favorite. A lot of people are saying that it could potentially qualify for Oscar noms, and I'd totally be behind that, because I think it's a really fun and like, you know, charming song. It's definitely like, when we think of Vivo, I think that's the song everyone's going to think of. I'm going to think of One of a Kind, but I think a lot of people are going to think of Keep the Beat, so I have no issues with that potentially getting nominated at all. there's really only one song I didn't like, and that actually is Gabby's solo. I just felt that it felt completely out of place from the rest of the movie. Her song called My Own Drum, it just didn't really gel with the rest of the songs. It honestly felt like it's from a completely different movie, and I just didn't really feel like it belonged here overall. Like I said, I do think this is a very enjoyable movie. It definitely is well-intentioned. It's got a really good message about legacy and, like, you know, living up to your true potential, but we've just seen it covered way better in other movies, and I just don't think it does anything particularly different with it. So overall, I think that I appreciate what it's going for, but as a whole package, I just found it to be very underwhelming, especially with the streak that Lin-Manuel Miranda's been having. This is easily, I think, his weakest project yet, that I just don't think fully came together in the way that he wanted it to. It does have a really good ending. I like the way this movie did wrap up, but overall, I just found it to be a very disappointing film. It's yet another really big disappointment in a summer that's very much full of them. I understand why people are really enjoying this movie. I understand why a lot of people want to recommend this one, but for me, I think this is a film that is very enjoyable in the moment. It's not something you're going to be super annoyed by, but it just wasn't something that fully did stick with me overall. So sadly, I do have to give Vivo a C+. Oh my god, here we are again. The Kissing Booth 3, seemingly the last in this franchise. As to be expected, I was pretty much dreading the fuck out of this movie like I have with the first two, and this one's definitely really bad. I will say, it probably is the least terrible of the three, but it's still a really bad movie overall. The one thing I will give this film is that it is somewhat, and I mean somewhat, trying to do something a bit different. It's a little bit more focused on Elle and her going to college and, you know, her personal life and things like that. It doesn't do a terrible job with diving a bit deeper into those aspects of her character and these characters having to go their separate ways. You know, that is something the film does a good job with. The problem is, it doesn't really want to commit to that. Instead, this film basically plays as a greatest hits collection of the first two films. But the first two films suck, so there is no, like, greatest hits here. Most of this movie feels completely recycled, feels like completely recycled beats, from the first two movies. There really isn't much going on here in terms of plot that feels different, that feels original. It all just feels like we are treading the same ground, and that's what makes this film so utterly annoying to watch. I mean, the characters of Marco and the other girl that whose name I can't remember because she's not memorable, they both come back in this movie. No point to them. Literally no point to them. They're literally just here to overcomplicate things. They're there to add drama into the Elle and Noah plot. You know, we know how things are going with these two at this point. We know that these two are probably going to stay together. They went through the same exact shit in the second movie where it seemed like he was going to cheat on her and then he didn't, and then they stayed together. You know, we know the same thing is going to happen here, so I don't understand why they need to bring these two characters back. We know that as good of a guy Marco is, Elle is not interested in him in that way, so there was just no point to bring either of these characters back. If you were going to do that, you should have given them a different purpose in the movie, and they really don't do that at all. There's a good scene with Elle and Marco where he's talking to her about something that he's gonna do in his future, but other than that, there really is no reason to bring either of these characters back here, and I think that was just a really bad call overall, and I think it definitely is one of the things that brings this movie down. But then you also add the fact that 3 movies in, I gotta be honest, I don't know a lot about who these characters are, and I really was thinking that watching this movie. Elle as a character, I don't really know who she is besides being, you know, Noah's girlfriend and Lee's best friend. That's really all we know her as. We don't know, you know, what she wants to do in her life. We don't know what she wants to pursue. We don't know what her life goal is. We don't know anything about her, and it just makes her such a uninteresting character to follow. And so there's a moment in this movie where Molly Ringwald finally, like, calls her out on it, and she's like, when are you gonna start, like, thinking for yourself? And I'm like, yes, finally, we're starting to dive a bit deeper into her. But this is only, like, when there's, like, 30 minutes left of the movie, and I'm just like, oh, now we decide to, like, dive deeper into her. Do we forget about the fact that, like, her mom, like, died and we just completely glossed over that? Like, are we just never gonna come back to that? And then we got this stupid plot going on where it seems like her dad is, like, with some new girl, and Elle doesn't really like that. I mean, I don't know what's going on here. There's, like, a ton of different things going on in this movie. Again, the acting here is not terrible. I actually think everyone is doing an alright job. Even Meganne didn't piss me off as much in this movie. I didn't think she was as bad. I still don't like that character at all. I don't like the character of Rachel very much at all here. I think, again, she's really just here to overcomplicate things. There's some relationship drama going on between her and Lee that is just completely underplayed. We never really get to dive deep into what they're even really arguing about. And Lee, oh my god, is maybe the most insufferable he's ever been in this movie. There is a whole subplot in this film where Lee is concerned that Elle is going off to college without him. This is going to be the first time they're ever separated. So she wants them to go through this list. And then about halfway through the movie, he's like, fuck the list. Who cares about the list? And then he's mad at her that they're not going off the list. And it's like, just make up your mind, dude. Like, what is important to you? Is the friendship important, or is the prospect of the list important? Like, which is important here? It just seems like he doesn't really know. So that was definitely very frustrating to watch. Like I said, the majority of this movie, it just feels so scattershot in that way. I will say that the previous film felt like this series of subplots. This one just feels really overstuffed. There's just so much going on here, and none of it is wrapped up in a very satisfying manner. And to me, it felt pretty clear throughout this film, they really have no ideas left at this point. They're really just churning out whatever is left, whatever shit that they can come up with to add conflict in there. They're just gonna throw it in there. And what really, I think, pisses me off about this movie is that I do think there was attempts to try to do something different, to try to make this feel a little bit more satisfying, to give this a little bit more of substance than there actually is. But unfortunately, they don't even try to do that here. Anytime they're going to try to dive deeper into something, it's completely glossed over. There's so many montages in this movie. I felt like every other scene there was a montage happening, and most of them are completely unnecessary. The trailer kind of makes it seem like this movie's gonna be about, like, the four of them, like, vacationing together. No, that's like the first, like, 10 minutes of the movie. We completely zoom through that and then cut to, like, the end of the summer, and I'm just like, what's the point? Like, why couldn't we spend a whole movie just seeing these four in the summer? I mean, yeah, I don't like these characters, but at least we get to see them do something a little bit different. It feels a little bit more, simplistic in that way, but I guess simplicity isn't something this franchise knows how to do, so I mean, I shouldn't expect them to know how to do that here. Again, the film is just, I think in general, the writing is just really bad here overall. It's so cheesy and horribly written. There's a lot of really awful dialogue. There's another scene. I talked about that list that, Lee and Elle, like, obsess over. There's this one thing that she ends up doing. It's like taking him to this, like, Mario Kart race of sorts, and what they decide to do with that, I was literally speechless with the way that played out. The way that scene was filmed, I have no idea what they were thinking, but it is maybe one of the dumbest things this franchise has ever done. And in a franchise that's been pretty dumb all the way throughout, that really is saying a lot. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to really dislike about this film. Like I said, what ultimately saves it from being, like, one of the worst things of the year are the performances. Joey King's still good here. Jacob Elordi, even Joel Courtney's not too bad. I think everyone acting-wise is doing a fine job for the most part. I will say Jacob Elordi kind of seems bored at this point. Like, it really seems like he wants out of this, but even he's not nearly, like, as robotic as he was in that first movie, so I'll definitely still give him that. And I actually didn't mind the way the movie did wrap up. They have an ending of sorts that actually felt somewhat plausible and didn't just feel like something they kind of, like, shoehorned in there, so I actually kind of liked where they ended up heading towards the end of this film. But really, other than that, I mean, this just really really, what could have been actually, I think, a really satisfying end, really just feels like a filler entry. This feels like a movie that they were very much just writing as they went along. They really had no idea what they really wanted to do here. They knew they wanted to make 3 movies, but they had no roadmap on how they were actually going to get there. So it really just makes both of these films feel completely pointless overall. I'm not really happy that we got them because they didn't really add much of anything to the story. They just were 2 other adventures with these horribly written characters. Yay, I guess. I mean, I don't know, Netflix wants to turn fucking everything into a franchise these days. It worked for the 2 All the Boys films, but it has not worked for these at all. And while this is, I think, the best of the 3, it's still really bad. And definitely a film that really did annoy me in many different areas. I really couldn't stand this one at all. Kissing Booth 3 gets a D. I'm really glad this franchise put to rest. Please tell me this is the end. I don't want to see like a Kissing Booth reunion announcement or TV show or anything like that. Just put it to rest. We don't need it anymore. It's not something that's important. Just go away. No more Kissing Booth. Focus on literally anything else and I'll be happy. There's a lot of stuff Netflix is doing that's really cool. This is very much on the bottom of the barrel. I've never understood the appeal of this series, and especially towards the end, I still very much do not get the appeal. So yeah, not a big fan of this one very much at all. Definitely one of the stupidest movies I've watched all year. Alright, Free Guy is every bit as great as I think you've really heard. This film is just so much fun and honestly way more creative than I really was expecting. Yes, we've seen movies where characters are trapped in video games, but this film really tries to do something different with it. It puts you in 2 different perspectives. You have Ryan Reynolds, who's Guy, who, you know, his entire life he has been told to live it a certain way, so he really isn't questioning it, and then eventually comes in contact with Jodie Comer, who is someone that is this big game developer. This is something that matters a lot to her, but that idea was kind of stolen from her, and when these 2 do cross paths, she kind of opens him up to like a new way of life, and I really ended up liking this film a lot. I think that Ryan Reynolds is perfectly cast here. You really do buy him in this role. He is so fun and likable, and Guy as a character really does go through quite the journey in this movie. Like I said, he starts off as someone that's like very complacent and just kind of like, you know, happy-go-lucky in that way, but as the movie goes on, he starts to really question a lot of different aspects. You know, why are things so repetitive? Why do things go in the way they are? Free City, it's not really a great place to live. It's constantly erupting into chaos, and Guy doesn't really understand that. And I think this film, you know, really does say a lot about trying to change the state of things. You know, things don't have to stick to a certain status quo. You can branch off and do your own thing. And, you know, while that's an idea that we've seen in different movies, I think this film handles it really well. And I really did like where Guy ended up going in this movie. I thought that was something that was very effective, but what I enjoyed even more about this film was Jodie Comer's character. I think she absolutely steals the show here, not only because of the character that she's playing, where, you know, she's both in the real world and in the game, where she has this heightened accent of sorts and does a really good job with handling that, because obviously that is her real accent, and I think she does a good job with playing that character, but the film surprisingly has a lot more to say about video game culture than I really did expect it to. The idea that, you know, we don't always have someone that is the most passionate about the games attached to it. Sometimes when it falls into the wrong hands, the game goes very corporate. The game goes down a path where it doesn't even feel like it's, you know, it feels like a shell of what the original intent for the game was. And you really do get to see that through Jodie Comer's character. This is someone whose creation was basically taken away from her, and it's now in the hands of someone like Taika Waititi's character, who is so just selfish and really just very egotistical and very much a mercenary in everything that he's doing. He doesn't really care about much of anything except for making a profit here. He is willing to just destroy everything and burn it to the ground, and again, I really did like where they end up going. There's one scene especially in the 3rd act, and I was surprised with how far they really went with it, but I was like, wow, this is actually really fascinating. Like, this feels like something that could very much happen. As outrageous as this does feel like something that could happen with a video game. Not someone going into a video game, obviously, but like what ends up happening to Jodie Comer's character in the real world, it feels like something that has happened before, and I think the film does a pretty good job of portraying that overall. It also helps that the film is very funny. There's a lot of really great gags here that I very much did enjoy. Just some of the side characters that guy comes across, you know, they do these little gags to them that you think you're gonna get really annoying, but eventually they start to serve much more of a purpose in the film, and that's something that I really did appreciate overall, and I think the film does a really strong job with that. Lil Howery, his relationship with him, you really do buy into it. It's just really genuine to watch, and you really do root for these two characters, and I think they did a good job with that part of the film. And then Taika Waititi, let's talk about him. A lot of people have been very divided with whether or not his character, he's overdoing it. I do think he is overcooking it a bit, but I think for the most part, it does work. This is a very, like I said, selfish character. This is definitely a guy that's very larger than life. He's very obnoxious in that way, and he's someone that really doesn't give a fuck. He will always do what he can to get his way, and he's not going to let anyone, you know, step on his toes, and I think he plays that role very well here. It's very different from what we are used to seeing him do, but I think he overall plays this character pretty well, so I definitely enjoy what they end up doing. And like I said, I think creatively this film is really well done. The cinematography, this just feels like a real world. You forget that you're in a video game when you're in Free City, and I think that's what really is impressive about this film. I feel like a lot of video game movies, they want to film it as if you're playing a video game, but that's not the way to go about it, because again, video games and movies are two completely different mediums, and I think this movie wisely recognized the fact that, like, this needs to look like a real world. This needs to look tangible because it's the world, it's the environment that the characters live in, and again, it does feel very real. This feels like a place that could exist, and I think they do a good job with handling that overall. The film gets really surprisingly creative as well. There's one scene, especially in the climax, that I was just absolutely loving. It's a scene that's getting memed up a lot on Twitter. I thought it was actually really funny in context of the movie. I really like what they end up doing with it. Like I said, it's nothing amazing, but I think overall it's really well done for what it is. It has a sense of heart to it that I really did appreciate. It has a lot to say about video game culture. My only real flaw with this movie, I would say, is that there is a subplot going on that is this romance of sorts, and it just felt very underdeveloped to me. I didn't feel as connected to that story just because I didn't really feel like they gave us the time to really latch onto them. It does end in a very sweet manner, and that's something I did appreciate. This film does have a real sense of heart to it that does feel very genuine, but overall I just wanted a little bit more from that. But I think for what they did a pretty good job with it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one a lot. I think it is very charming. It's very fun. It's a great movie for families to watch as well, and it's a really good video game movie, which is not something that we can usually say, but this film does do a really good job with that. Guy as a character, he doesn't feel like Deadpool. He really is his own character in that way, and that's something that I really did appreciate. Jodie Comer pretty much does steal the show here, though. The action sequences are actually really well filmed, too. Overall, I really did enjoy this one, so I'm gonna give Free Guy a B+. I definitely think that in a summer where there's been a lot of duds, I think this is one of the few summer blockbusters that generally did deliver and turned out what actually is a really fun original film that I wouldn't be against seeing more of. The note that they end this on, they definitely could do more in the future. I don't know if I necessarily want them to, but if they announced it, I wouldn't be against it. I think there's definitely more you can do with this world, so yeah, why not? Give me a new one. I would love to see what they end up doing, and yeah, we'll see how that really does turn out, but really did enjoy this one a lot overall. Respect overall, I thought was very disappointing. This is a very by-the-numbers and cookie-cutter biopic. There really is not a lot about this that really does stick out to me. The one thing that definitely I think everyone will collectively agree on is that Jennifer Hudson is a revelation in this film. I knew she would be really good, but I did not know she would be this good. I mean, the performance that she gives in this movie completely transforms into Aretha Franklin. There's not a single point in this film where I watched it and I felt like I was watching Jennifer Hudson. I did feel like I was watching Aretha Franklin through and through, and I think she did a really great job of transforming into this character. It felt very natural. It felt like She really understood every single emotional highs and lows, and I think she does a really good job with that. And she's really the thing that holds this movie together. Unfortunately, aside from the layers that she adds this character, there just isn't really a lot going on here. This feels like a very fact-based documentary biopic. There's a lot of moments that are very much undercut. There's like something really traumatic that happens to Aretha Franklin. Like, I want to say the first 15 or 20 minutes of this movie, and I was like, holy shit, like I had no idea that she went through something that horrible in her childhood, and they completely gloss over it. They don't really dive into it in the way that I wanted them to. There's a lot of moments that, even though this movie is 2.5 hours, it feels incredibly rushed. Almost every single event that they go through, it's just done in a very rushed and fragmented manner, and so it just was very frustrating to watch. I think there's some really strong acting here, though. Forest Whitaker is great as her father. You understand the passion that he has for his daughter, but you also understand how that really does complicate a lot of aspects of her life. He's very overprotective of her. He doesn't have a great relationship with her mother, and I think he did a good job of playing that role and not making him feel too cartoony overall. Marlon Wayans, I thought, was really good here. I want to see him do more serious work. I've talked about how good of a serious actor he is here, and he did not disappoint. I really enjoyed his performance in this movie overall, so I liked what he ended up doing here. Audra McDonald, I thought, was really good. Mark Maron, everyone gives a strong performance in this movie. It really just comes down to that screenplay, which again just feels like a generic biopic. There isn't much about this film that sticks out. There isn't much that it's doing story-wise that we haven't seen before. A lot of it really is just the highs and lows of Aretha Franklin's career. There's a lot of things that happen here that we've seen play out in other biopics, and unfortunately, it just doesn't really stick out. I will say the last 20 to 30 minutes are great of this movie. They do a really good job of finally covering a very emotional period in her life. You really do feel like you go through this with her. It very much reminded me of United States versus Billie Holiday, where a lot of the film feels very fragmented, but they finally get it right in those last few minutes. That's very much like Respect. I think this is considerably a better movie than that, because this film never bored me in the way that film did. I felt like this film did have a true purpose, whereas I struggled to understand the purpose of that film. Here, I understood what they were trying to do. I understood a lot of the moments they were trying to convey. I did feel emotion in quite a few parts of this movie. I did feel invested in quite a few moments of this movie. It just was far too brief for my liking, and there were a lot of things that I wish they could have dived a lot deeper into, but what keeps the film as good as it is are the performances here. All of them are really well done, especially Jennifer Hudson. The directing by Liesl Tommy isn't bad either. It definitely feels genuine. I didn't feel this movie was too over the top and cheesy, and that's something I did appreciate. It really is just that writing. I think that the screenplay is just very unremarkable, and I think could have been a lot better, and it really could have made this film stick out as something better. But unfortunately, this film, it really just kind of falls into the trappings that a lot of music biopics really do fall into, and that's really what I think does bring this film down overall. There's some great cinematography, the costume design top notch, the way they recreate the music. I love that Jennifer Hudson is actually singing these songs and not just dubbing over Aretha Franklin. That's something I really did appreciate. But overall, this film, it just did not really deliver on the level that I wanted to. I would totally be down for Jennifer Hudson to get some nominations for this, because I think she's amazing, but aside from that, there just isn't a lot to remember about this one. So I'm going to give Respect overall a C+. Coda is wonderful. Everything you've heard about this movie, it very much lives up to the hype in that way. I remember when this was coming out at Sundance and everyone was raving about it, and I've been very excited to see it since then, and like I said, it really is something special. I mean, I think what this film does really well is that we've had a lot of films focusing on deaf characters and kind of seeing the world through their perspective. We literally got that with Sound of Metal last year, with someone that is slowly turning deaf, but we don't usually see it in the perspective of someone that has to live with a deaf family and is the only member of their family that can hear, that is that does have that ability. What does that really do to them? And what are the struggles that they have to go through? I think this film covers that very well. What I like about this movie is that it never tries to portray the family in a demeaning manner. It never tries to make it seem like the family is the problem. It shows that she truly does love her family. She wants to be there for them. It can be tough, but she wants to be there for them. The types of things that she ends up doing for them, especially when it comes to this fishing business that they need to keep afloat, because they're not really financially stable with that, and she's kind of the one that is keeping them on top of things. You can see that she has this love for them, but that really does cloud her genuine passion for singing, which they don't even know about, which is crazy to think about, right? The fact that they don't even know her actual passion. But I think the film really does flesh out both halves very well. You understand why at points she does have a very complicated relationship with them, to the point where she doesn't really know if her parents have that love for her. But there's eventually this really great moments with both of her parents, and by the end of the movie I really just found myself loving all of the characters here. I mean, Emilia Jones is so good in this role. You really, I think, will find yourself identifying with her. We've all had that thing in life that people have told us that we can't do. We've all had that thing in life that we want to pursue, but it's not necessarily easy to do, and there's like circumstances that complicate it. And we've also all had that moment where we eventually have to make a choice in our life that's very difficult, and I think she represents that very well here. She brought so much heart and passion, and I know that I've seen her in some things before, but I think overall she gave such a strong performance in this movie, and she's really going to end up being something special. But it's the deaf actors here that really end up sticking out. Particularly Troy Kotsur and Marley Martin are phenomenal in this movie. The two scenes that they have in this film, both one-on-ones with their daughter, are really the scenes I think that are going to get to you emotionally. I think those are the scenes that really did stick out to me, and I think they did a really good job with that overall, and understanding the relationship she has with those characters. I mean, it feels really well done. But again, you really get to see her passion for music fully flourish as well, whether it's through her teacher, Eugenio Derbez, who can be a bit tough on her but really does see the best in her as a singer, or whether it's through her relationship with Ferdia Walsh-Pilo's character, Miles, who throughout the movie you're kind of annoyed with, because he's someone that seems to have this passion, but she's not necessarily sure if he respects her family, if he's going to, enjoy her family. And you kind of realize that there's a little bit more in the way he reacts to her family, is not something that she's very pleased with. But what I like is that you eventually realize there's more going on with him than expected as well. He's going through his own struggles, and the film really does dive deeper into that. So I think overall, in terms of characters, I mean, this film is rock solid. There's a lot of really great moments where, you get to see the difficulties that the parents face as well with their love for their daughter. They know that they have it, but they're not necessarily sure how to express it, especially when it comes to her singing. This is something that they've never really dealt with before, and they're not necessarily sure how they need to go about it. They're not necessarily approving of it either because it is very challenging for them. Every single character in this movie is going through some kind of challenge that they need to overcome, and you see how for some of them it really does start to eat away at them as people, but for some of them they're able to kind of move past it, and I think they do a good job with that in this movie. And the movie's also, really funny. There's one moment especially that really does stick with me in terms of something that Ruby ends up going through. But again, the movie's never at the expense of these characters. It just is very situational in that way. The situation itself is very funny. The way it plays out is very funny. The film knows when to toe the line between, laughing at what's going on without making fun of these characters. It never tries to treat these characters in a way that's stigmatizing them, in a way that's disrespecting them. It handles everything in a very respectable and careful manner, and I really did appreciate that about this film. Even Ruby as a character is kind of going through something where, even though, yes, she's taking care of this family, she kind of has to go through this crossroads where it's should I finally stop caring as much for them? Am I putting too much emphasis on that? Am I wasting my life by spending too much time with my family, by helping them with things that that they can't. I think that's something that they do a really good job with here overall, and that's something I really did appreciate about this film. The cinematography as well is fantastic here. You know, you feel like you're in this environment with them, especially the fishing scenes. I think they do some really I think they do some really good stuff with that for sure. I was surprised by how much we get of the fishing stuff. We get just as much as we do with the music, and that's something I really did appreciate. And let me just say, the music here is really good, especially the soundtrack. Emilia Jones can really sing, and I really did enjoy a lot of the music in this movie. There's one song especially that you're never going to forget because it probably is going to make you cry, and I think that is definitely something that works very well here. The only real issue I have with this movie is concerning her relationship with her brother. It's not necessarily her relationship with her brother, because I think that's pretty well fleshed out. It's that he eventually gets into a relationship with a friend of Ruby's, and it just felt very underdeveloped. I didn't feel they did a very good job in really fleshing this relationship out. It felt very much put on the back burner after a while. They tried to do something with it at first, but it just didn't feel all that well dived into, so I think they could have done a little bit more there. But overall, I found this film to be really great overall. It's very fulfilling. It's very charming. It is a film that I think will make you cry, but it's very uplifting in that way, and especially the way the movie wraps up. I think it honestly is probably one of the best endings I've seen all year. It really wears its heart in its sleeve. It's got a really great message about the importance of family, but also knowing when to move on, knowing when to, you know, be independent and not, you know, having to rely on people and having to not, you know, having to make changes in your life. Is it okay to be selfish? You know, that's something else this movie really wants to dive into. So I think overall this is a very effective film. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. Definitely going to give this one an A-. Oh my god. All right, let's get to probably the most complicated discussion of films I'm gonna be talking about here. That's Don't Breathe 2. I mean, look, I'll say this about Don't Breathe 2. One, based on the way the first movie ended, this is not at all the sequel that I would have expected to exist. Two, I don't understand why anyone thought this movie was a good idea. Look, there are some things that do kind of save this movie. Stephen Lang is still really good here. He really is convincing as this character. He's very menacing. They try to give him a few more layers here, and he does do a good job of adding some bit of humanity to this role. I overall enjoyed what he ended up doing here, and I do think that he gives a very strong performance. He's definitely not the problem with this movie. Also not the problem with this movie, Madeline Grace is really good here. I've never seen her before, but she gives a really strong child performance, I think. You know, you definitely understand the kind of predicament that she's in, where she has been, you know, raised by the blind man all her life, but there's stuff that's starting to not add up, and I think overall, you know, she does a really good job at playing this character and things like that. But it has to be said, I mean, just the initial idea for this movie is so incredibly problematic. Every single thing that they try to do here. And I think what really hurts this film more than anything is that they tried to double down on the fact that, oh, we're not trying to redeem this character. That's not what's going on here. You know, we're not trying to make him the hero. But with the situations that they put this character in, where he is facing people that honestly are just as bad as him, and they're trying to frame it that way, yeah, I mean, I don't really, and especially when you get to, like, the end of this movie where he's being tortured constantly and these men are, like, coming after him, and I mean, how else am I supposed to feel about this? Because it certainly seems like you want me to sympathize with this guy. You want me to feel bad for him, and it's just not going to happen because I cannot get over the fact that this guy is a fucking psychopath. He literally killed and raped multiple people. Yes, obviously, you know, people like to say, oh, well, he didn't actually rape her. No, he did. He you know, definitely did some things that you should not do. There was, you know, some artificial insemination that was not consensual in any way. So I do think it was still very much rape and should be considered as such. So again, I think that whole thing just really rubs me the wrong way. But then it also doesn't help that every other actor in this movie besides Stephen Lang and Madeline Grace is fucking terrible here. They all feel like they're in some stupid like B movie on like the Sci-Fi Channel. They're really overdoing it in every single way possible. You know, a lot of just like shouting at the top of their lungs and just really overacting, and it just makes it really hard to watch. And after a while, this film, it just becomes very stagnant and boring because it's just a bunch of action going on. There isn't a lot of time in this movie where there isn't just a bunch of people, you know, causing all this chaos and wrecking havoc and, you know, hurting the blind man or the blind man getting the upper hand on them. Like, I just didn't really care after a while. I think that there could have been something interesting that they focused on here if they focused more on Phoenix's character, if this was more in her perspective. I really think this film could have worked, where we dive more into the idea that, oh my god, her father is not as good as she thought he was. But I think what really hurts this movie is the fact that it is a sequel to Don't Breathe. I think if this was literally anything else, I might actually be able to get behind this film. But because this is supposed to be the same blind man that did some really despicable and inhumane things in that first movie, I just can't get behind this at all. Again, it really is just so gross that they decided to go in this direction. It honestly feels like a joke. Like, this feels like something you would joke about, where it's like, oh my god, wouldn't it be so funny if they made a movie where the blind man is suddenly like the hero? No, it's terrible. And like I said, where they decide to go with some of these characters that are now suddenly, you know, that are torturing the blind man. There's a reveal that happens in the third act of this movie, and I was so baffled by what they decided to do. I was like, where are you even trying to go with this? Because for a while, like I said, it seems like our character's like at a crossroads where they end up going with her. You know, the Phoenix, the character, it seems like she's kind of at a crossroads overall with how she's really feeling about this. And then something happens and it's like, oh, that's it? Okay, I didn't understand much of what this film was trying to go for at all. Again, I don't understand how you write the script in the way you do, and you don't think that, maybe we're trying a little too hard to redeem this character. Maybe we're trying a little too hard to sympathize with him. Hell, there's a monologue he has in the third act of this movie, and it really does feel like they are trying so hard to get you to feel for what he's going through, and I just couldn't, because again, of all the terrible things that he did. So like I said, I think what really does hurt this movie is the fact that it is a direct sequel to Don't Breathe. I think that's what really does bring it down overall. There's not like a ton of references to the first movie or anything like that, but there are things that he'll, you know, make note of, and you can kind of pinpoint what he is overall talking about. So yeah, I can't get behind this movie at all. I found it to be very problematic and really icky in quite a few areas. I do think there is some upside with Stephen Lang and Madeline Grace, and I do think there are some occasional scenes that I thought were generally very intense. The setup is actually pretty intriguing as well, with the idea of her, you know, basically being raised by the blind man. I thought there were some interesting things they could have done there, but overall, I think this film is just way too irresponsibly handled for me to get behind it. So I definitely have to give this one a C-. And look, there have been some very unnecessary sequels in horror lately, but this is truly one of the most questionable ones I've seen in a very long time. Very much do not recommend this one. I gotta say, Reminiscence is a film that I think I'm in a bit of a minority with. I know a lot of people were really shitting on this one, saying that it was just a generic sci-fi movie, and in some aspects, yeah, we've definitely seen this before, but what I think Reminiscence does really well is it really does a great job of showing what you can do when you don't have the biggest budget. It is pretty clear when watching this movie, this is not like $1 million film. Like, you can tell they're not churning out tons of money to make this movie, but I actually don't think they needed it, because what we get instead is actually a pretty personal story here about the idea of memories. Is memory something that, we should consistently stew over, or is it something that is, not as important? Why do we constantly harken back to memories? Why is this something that matters so much to us? I think that's something this film does do a really good job with. The acting here is also very strong. Hugh Jackman gives a very strong performance. I know a lot of people have said his character is very creepy in many aspects, but I think they frame it in such a way where you do understand why he feels the connection he does to the character of May. Especially with, what he's really doing. I think they do a good job with that overall. So I wasn't really like that I wasn't really that creeped out by it. And honestly, I was pretty intrigued to see where that story was going to go between those two. And where they ended up going with it was not necessarily what I would have expected them to do. They kind of went in a unpredictable direction, I feel like, with that story. And I thought it was really well done overall. But I also enjoy a lot of the side stories that are going on here. Nick Bannister as a character, he has this ability where he's basically able to get people to relive different memories in their life, whatever specific memory that they're tied to. He's able to cue it up, and it's almost like they're back there. And there's a lot of interesting stories that we discover through these different people, whether it's, say, someone like Marina de Tavera's character of Tamara Sylvan. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with her. Angela Serafian. There's a lot going on there. Brett Cullen has a pretty big role in this movie. So I did find myself connected to quite a few characters here, and I think they do a good job with that. Lisa Joy, I think, directed this film in a very strong manner. She is not trying to make some big budget generic sci-fi film. Like I said, she's trying to make something that feels a lot more personal, a lot more down to earth, and that's something that I really do applaud this film for. That being said, the film does not have a lack of action in any way. There are quite a few action set pieces here that I found to be generally very thrilling. One, especially towards the end, that I thought was really well done, this chase sequence that goes down. I was very impressed by the way that panned out. Maybe the best in this entire movie, though, is Thandie Newton. I mean, and that's not surprising to me that Thandie Newton gives as strong a performance as she does. I mean, she has some really great standout moments here. She's both a really good friend to Hugh Jackman, but you're also really invested in what's going on with her as a character. So I think they did some really good stuff with her overall. I really enjoyed the score that was provided here. And like I said, I think overall this is a very interesting idea. It has a lot more to say than a generic sci-fi movie. I do think this film has a lot to say about the importance of memories and why we need to harken back on them, but not dwell on them constantly. What can that really do to us? I think the film overall does a pretty good job with that. I think the only thing that really does bring it down for me is there are some very underwritten characters here. Daniel Wu plays this drug dealer of sorts, and I just could not for the life of me care about him. Anytime he popped up into the film, I found myself really zoning out. I did not find his character to be very interesting at all, and I really just was not attached to his character. He just felt like a very generic sort of drug dealer to me. Like, there just wasn't many dimensions to him overall. I also found the world building to be kind of weak here. This is a world in which it's constantly hot because of the way things have gone. It's caused like the seas to rise, and there's like this flood over Miami, and basically because that, like, everyone kind of lives at night due to climate change. I thought that was an interesting idea, and they don't really do like a ton with that. I think that the world building, there was more they could have done with that to kind of like play around with the setting, and I don't really think they took that opportunity, so that was a bit of a loss overall. And I think the only other thing that really does bring this movie down is I do think that it does drag in quite a few areas. I think that the second act is a little bit slow with the way that it's going, but I think overall it does pay off in a pretty satisfying manner. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. I don't think it's amazing or anything, but it's definitely a lot better than I think people are saying, so I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I'm gonna give it a B. I don't think it's like a must-see or anything, but like I said, if you want to see a sci-fi film that is a lot more lower budget and actually kind of like takes advantage of it, I actually do recommend this one because it shows what you can really accomplish with a not very high budget, and that's something I really did appreciate about this one. So yeah, I overall recommend this one. Never in my life would I be sitting here and say the Paw Patrol the movie generally surprised me, but it actually did. I found this film to be generally very charming and fun, and I think that's something that works very well here. Now look, this is not an amazing movie. There are quite a few things that do fall flat here. There's way too many characters, first off. I'll say that right now. There are way too many characters to the point where sometimes it is very hard to keep track of what everybody's doing, but the one character I did find myself latching onto was Chase. I really liked this character quite a bit. He's this police pup, but he's a little bit skittish. He's not entirely sure if he's up for the task, and there's some really good scenes with him where, you know, he's supposed to be going on the job and he just kind of like freezes up, and you really do feel for his character. You understand, you know, what he is feeling in that exact moment, and the relationship that he has with Ryder especially, I found to be a very endearing one. I really liked their back and forth, and I thought they did some really good stuff there. The movie's also really funny. Like, I was surprised by how much I was actually laughing here. There are some jokes that I actually really did like in this film. Even the villain, he's definitely generic, but you do understand, you know, what he's really trying to do, Mayor Humdinger. He basically has like this big dislike for dogs, and he wants to, you know, basically mainly just because he's a cat person, and so he wants to, like, shut down everything that they're doing, and he's actually really fun to follow, so I enjoyed him quite a bit. Like I said, I think the thing that does bring this down is that there are a few too many characters here, but what makes up for it is the animation. The score as well is really good here. There's some good action sequences as well, so yeah, I enjoyed this one. I don't have a ton to say about it, but overall, it's a lot better than what I expected. B- for Paw Patrol the movie. I don't think this is like a must-see or anything, but considering what I thought it was going to be, this was honestly a really nice surprise. So I do actually surprisingly recommend this one. The Night House is a very different movie than I think people are expecting. Don't go into this thinking this is going to be like some like scary haunted house movie, because it is that, but I don't really think that's mainly what this film is. In fact, I actually wouldn't classify it as a horror film. This is much more of a psychological thriller that really is a meditation on processing grief, how hard it is to let things go, how hard it is to really say goodbye to something important in our life, and that's exactly what our character is facing in this movie. Our main character here, who is masterfully played by Rebecca Hall, easily like one of the best performances of the year so far. Rebecca Hall is like one of those actresses where she doesn't do a ton of movies, but whenever she pops up in something, she really reminds me just how great of a talent she is, and this might just be the best work I've ever seen from her, the character of Beth. It just feels so real in this film. You understand every single emotion that she's going through. She did not have a great relationship with her husband Owen, but because of the fact that he's killed himself, she feels immense guilt over what went down. She has no idea. This seemingly has come out of nowhere. She has no idea what could have led him to do this, and she's thinking back on certain things that happened within their relationship, certain things that he would do, certain ways that he would act, and this is really starting to, you know, mess with her psyche, and you really see her kind of go down this dark path. And I think every single emotion she handles in such a authentic manner. There's never a second in this movie where you do not buy what she's selling. You feel her grief, you feel her paranoia, hell, you feel the fear that's inducing within her. She's thinking about all the worst possible things that could have happened to her husband, that could have gotten him to do this, and you really do understand what's going on, but you also understand her curiosity. So many characters in this movie are telling her, just let this go, don't let this bother you, but she doesn't want to do that. She's increasingly obsessed in diving deeper into her husband's life and trying to figure out, you know, what's going on with him, and it gets her to reveal some pretty damning details, I would say, about her husband, some of which I really wasn't expecting. There are quite a few directions this movie goes in that I was very surprised by, and honestly, I will give the movie a lot of credit for that, because I feel like I knew what they were doing at a certain point, and then it kind of takes this turn, and I was very happy with where this film ended up going. I know a lot of people have kind of been shitting on the third act of this movie, but I actually thought the third act here was very strong. I think they did a very good job in the third act of piecing things together, but also really getting us to see what the point of this movie really is, which I really don't want to spoil for for anyone here. I think that definitely brings the movie down if you know going into it, what it really is about, what it's really trying to go for. So I don't really want to get into that too much, but just, to say the least, I think what they ended up doing, it was way more emotional than I really was expecting it to be. It was way more impactful and really leaves this impact on you that you don't stop thinking about. I haven't been able to stop thinking about the ending of this movie really since I saw it, and that really is a testament to just how great of a film this really is. I think what really does bring it down is that most of the supporting characters here are just kind of weak. There isn't a lot going on with them. They're not bad necessarily, but I wanted to know more about them. Specifically, Stacey Martin. This is this woman that Beth comes in contact with. I wanted more of her. I think that she, as a character, is really good. What we get with her, I really did enjoy, but I wanted to see more of these two interacting. I wanted to see more of the contrast between these two women. There's a connection that they share to Beth's husband, and I wanted to see more going on there. I think that definitely could have strengthened the film overall. I also do think the film takes a little bit to get going, but the film is generally unsettling in many areas, especially moments where Beth is just walking through the house. And what's great about this movie is that it doesn't really have any jump scares whatsoever. There aren't like any loud noises that are just coming out of nowhere. No, these are like generally loud noises. These are things that are happening around her, and you are just unsettled as she is. Whenever it's dark, especially in this movie, I had no idea where it was going to go at points. And like I said, by the end, I was generally very surprised by the places this film ended up going, the messages that it was going. It goes in some really deep and I think uncomfortable directions for a lot of people. I do think there's one plot twist that's kind of brushed aside, and I wish they could have dived a bit deeper into it overall. But for what this is, I think this was a generally very effective thriller. It has a lot to say about grief in ways that other films just haven't really touched upon it. It's not just about how we process grief, it's about how grief really consumes us and can really drive us mad after a while. I think this film does an excellent job with that. Great directing here from David Bruckner. Overall, I feel this is a film that already is getting forgotten about, and that's very unfortunate because I do think this is a very special film that a lot more people need to see. So definitely a B+ for The Night House. For Rebecca Hall's performance alone, I think this movie is worth watching, but I think as a whole package as well, it's generally a very effective thriller that I enjoyed quite a bit. Oh, Vacation Friends, one of the most frustrating but also forgettable films of the entire year, and I'll explain why it's both of those adjectives, because they don't really seem like they go together, right? How can a film be frustrating, but then I'm also forgetting about it? Well, here's the thing. The first 30 minutes of this movie, I actually was kind of enjoying. When these characters first show up at this resort, they're greeted by this very larger-than-life couple that seems to be just all over them. They want to be their best friends. They want to house, they want to, give them hospitality. They give them every possible thing that you could. They give them as much care as if they were friends for years. At least that's how they act with these people. And it actually is kind of fun to watch at first. I enjoyed watching this couple that is clearly trying to get married. They are going here for their honeymoon. This is something that they've wanted to do for a while, and see them entangled with this couple that is the complete opposite of them. They're very straight-laced, and this couple is very extravagant and extra with basically every single thing that they do, and that can be a lot of fun to watch. The problem is, this is not really a vacation movie. Eventually, as you saw in the trailer, they leave this vacation and go on their wedding, and once that wedding happens, that's really when this movie just grinds to a halt, because it just feels very repetitive after a while. I get it that this couple is supposed to be very overly friendly, but after a certain point, it's like, why are you even friends with them? Why are you letting them get away with this? Why don't you just tell them how you feel? I just didn't really understand that. The main couple we're following here as well, they're just not very interesting in this movie. They're not bad or anything. I think all the acting here is really good. Lil Rel Howery and John Cena especially, I really enjoyed here. I enjoyed their dynamic in the film, but I just thought that overall, it really just got tiring, and the laughs especially were very few and far between in this movie. I wasn't laughing a ton at what was going on, but like I said, the first 30 or so minutes I found to be very enjoyable. enjoyable, but once we get to that second act, it really just kind of screeches to a halt. And then you get to the third act, and it's like plot revelation after twist, and all these things are just piling on at once, and it felt very overwhelming. And I was like, okay, I'm starting to get into this a bit more. And then you realize, like, the movie's about to end. You're like, oh shit, we're actually getting close to the end of this. And I didn't really want to, because I felt like the film was finally starting to find its groove again, and unfortunately it just happened a little bit too late into the film. I do think the film ends on a generally very sweet and endearing note, which I wasn't really expecting, but overall, I mean, this film is just so frustrating because I thought for the first like 20 to 30 minutes that it was going to surprise me, that this was going to be a lot better than I thought it was, and maybe be like a really fun, throwaway comedy. But after a while, it just got very tiring, and I just found myself very frustrated by how this film really did turn out. So overall, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, but I will say the fact that there's been so many movies on Hulu that actually are really good, and this is the movie that's like gets the most views and already is like commissioned for a sequel, there are way more deserving films, and I really don't understand why this film got all the love that it really did. I think it's really just the fact that this was supposed to go to theaters, and people like, fun sort of summer comedies in that way, but I just didn't find this to be nearly as fun as I think that it really could have been. So overall, I just wasn't too impressed by Vacation Friends. I'm gonna give this one like a C. I didn't hate it. Like I said, there's quite a few fun aspects to it at first, but it really does wear thin after a while, and I think that's unfortunately what did bring it down for me. And now we end on actually the worst possible note here with He's All That, which, holy shit, I mean, what can I even say about this movie? I guess I'll start off by saying I don't even like the original film that this is based on. I think it's sexist, I think it's boring, it just doesn't work at all. I am not a fan of that film. It's the typical, like, the girl is a little bit nerdy looking, so we're gonna make her over, and suddenly she's going to be beautiful, and everyone's gonna want to fall for her. It's just bad. But honestly, this film finds a way to make that film look less problematic, to make that film look actually somewhat decent, because, I mean, the plot that we're centering on here is one of the most idiotic things I think I've ever seen. You have this girl that's like this big TikTok sensation because they have to base it off of Addison Rae. A lot of this film does very much feel like a vanity project for her. They're trying to promote her TikTok. They're constantly referencing TikTok and how great it is, and it just feels like a product after a while. It's the kind of Netflix movie that I can't stand, where they're constantly bringing up all these different brands. It's like, I know what TikTok is. I know how it works. You don't have to bring it up constantly and like shove it in my face, but the film really wants you to know that this girl is a TikToker, and this is what she spends her entire life doing, and she cares so much about her followers that she's willing to make this horrible bet to where she's gonna take this guy that honestly I didn't like either, but we'll get a little bit more into that, into, this guy that's like very like, he's very jaded, he's very cynical, he has weird views on things, and turn him into this like preppy looking guy, and basically we know that she's gonna fall in love with him. We know eventually they're gonna get really close. I mean, every predictable beat that you can think of happens in this movie. The girl that bets her on it, there's a bit more of a catch to it. She isn't super loyal to her. She ends up sleeping with, her ex-boyfriend, who breaks up with her, she ends up falling for her ex-boyfriend, who breaks up with her literally through a TikTok, which is why she loses her followers in the first place. There's so many things here that are just so predictable. But then you get to the guy here, and Tanner Buchanan, look, I love him in Cobra Kai. I think he's fantastic in that show, but oh my god, he is so bad here. Like, anytime they are trying to make this guy like this very smart and like sarcastic person, it just feels so forced. There isn't like, he has such weird like perspectives on things and things like that. I couldn't stand him at all, and he goes through this transformation of sorts that, like I said, it all just feels really like forceful in that way. But that is nothing compared to the truly mind-numbingly terrible performance from Addison Rae, which is easily one of the worst acting debuts that I have seen from an actor in quite a bit. Addison Rae here, I mean, look, I know she's a TikToker. I know she's popular on there, but it is clear to me they are really just trying to ride that success in that film. That is the only reason that she is in this film. It is literally just because they have someone popular, someone that a lot of people aren't going to know. I'm not a big TikToker myself. I go on there to see when my friends post stuff, but I don't post shit on there. I'm not funny, so I don't engage in TikToker TikTok content. So I had no idea who Addison Rae was, and just from this movie, I mean, she cannot act to save her life. Every single line she says in this like very bland delivery the whole time. She never really seems like she's overacting or she's underacting. She's just very bland. She's very wide-eyed like this the whole time. There's never a point in this movie where there's any inflection in her. It's just so bad. Like everything about her acting-wise is terrible. It is easily one of the worst performances that I have seen in a very long time. I was so baffled by the fact that she was in this movie. I'm even more baffled by the fact that she got a fucking Netflix deal from this movie, where I guess she's gonna make like 5 other movies, which, great. I'm so excited to see what stupid shit she's gonna turn out next. And then Peyton Meyer, another actor that I usually really like here. I mean, I don't know what he's doing in this movie. They're trying to make him like a Jake Paul type character of sorts, and it is so unbelievably cringy to watch what he ends up going through in this movie. He treats everyone like shit. They seem to think it's like hilarious to just watch him be like a jerk to everyone, and it's just not. Like, it's just really not funny to watch at all. It's really stupid, and I don't like any of what they're trying to go for there. Like I said, there isn't a single direction this movie went in that surprised me. There isn't anything really that made me laugh here. I found most of the humor to be utterly terrible and so bottom of the barrel and LCD in that way. Tanner Buchanan has a sister in this movie. She looks like she's like the age of 14, and for some reason she's engaging in these high school gatherings, hanging out with all these high school people, has opinions on everyone in his high school. I don't know what they were thinking here when it came to this character. I didn't understand the point of her. I didn't understand the directions they went with her as a character. Nothing about her made sense to me, and that applies to many of the characters in this movie. This friend that Tanner Buchanan has, suddenly when he starts to get closer to the popular crowd, like, they're not as close anymore. Oh my god, couldn't have seen that coming. Like I said, Madison Pettis still continues to be awful here. As an actress, I mean, she has just gotten worse and worse as she's gone on. This might just be her worst performance yet as the character she's playing. She's so one-note and annoying, and I couldn't stand her in this movie. The message in this film you can see coming from a mile away with what they end up doing here. And then there's this twist with Addison Rae's character that they do in the movie, and I was so baffled by what they decided to do with her, by the way they decided to present what they were ultimately doing with her, the way that they were going about it. It was so utterly stupid, and it's mainly because it's not really that much of a twist. Like, it's obvious what's going on. It's obvious what they are trying to do with her. They present her as someone that's like seemingly perfect, and oh my god, she has flaws to her. Like, nothing about that is a twist. Like, no shit, she has flaws. I'm not surprised that that's where they end up going. Literally, the only, and I mean the only saving grace of this movie is Matthew Lillard. He comes up at a few points in this movie, and whenever he's there, he's generally very funny. There are these things they do with him at first over the intercom, and he says like kind of weird things. I didn't think that was particularly funny, but he has this scene at a school dance, and you can tell that he just does not want to be there at all. He's trying to get through things as quickly as possible, and the reason it's funny is mainly because it feels like Matthew Lillard is the audience watching this movie. Like, he is just as annoyed watching this. He is just as over this movie. He doesn't want anything to do with it, and it just makes it very humorous to watch as a result. So yeah, he is like the only thing that really saves this film. Rachel Lee Cook is here too, and she just seems so bored. Like, she could not be any more checked out of this film. Like, it does not seem like she wants to be here very much at all. There's one moment that they do with her where they try to reference the original film. I have not cringed that hard at a reference type joke in a while. I mean, I was so just annoyed with what they decided to do. I was like, no, that's terrible. Don't do that. So much of this movie just feels like a first draft in that way. Oh yeah, Kourtney Kardashian like plays a considerably big role in this, and I don't know why, but the fact that she plays such a big, decently sized role in this movie, I mean, that should really tell you the kind of movie that you're dealing with here. Everything about this is just such a stupid, schlocky teen comedy that I couldn't stand really at all. It's got endless product placements. It's got one of the worst performances that I've seen in a while from Addison Rae. He's All That is just as bottom of the barrel in terms of Netflix films as I feel you can really go. If it wasn't for that one performance, this legitimately would be an F, but because of the one performance, I am going to go ahead and give He's All That a D-, but it's a very light one. Like, take that into consideration. This is a very light D-. Like, this is really as bottom of the barrel as I feel Netflix comedies can go. I'm very shocked that it's as bad as it is, especially because the director here actually has a pretty good body of work overall in terms of the other comedies that he's directed, but wow, this really fell flat in every single way possible, and this is why I continue to just be baffled at Netflix. I have no idea why they continue to take a chance and invest in these projects, but the ones that are actually good for them, they don't put nearly as much time into, so I'll just never understand it, and that's essentially where we are when it comes to this one. It's absolutely terrible. I don't even recommend watching it out of sheer curiosity. It is just one of the dumbest Netflix comedies that I've seen in a very long time. Definitely bottom of the barrel for sure. Oh man, that was not a very positive note to end on, but other than that, guys, I really do hope you guys did enjoy this video. Like I said, if it seems a little bit rough and scattershot, it's because I'm still trying to get into the groove of this, of really trying to, like, you know, do this in such a way where it's not a catch-up review, but it's not a full-on review either. That's why some of these might be longer than others. But I enjoy this overall. I think this is a good idea. I'm looking forward to doing this in the upcoming months for sure. I do have a lot of videos to catch up on. I'm aware of that, but I'm going to try to take these next few weeks or so to try to catch up on everything, and hopefully I'm able to do that by the end of the week. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, comment down below. Let me know what you guys thought of any of these movies whatsoever. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.